Have you ever wondered which pair of states disagree the most in presidential elections? Well, there are three possible answers depending on how you look at the historical data. This is because many states did not gain statehood until later in the country's history, so there is less data on them. Furthermore, electoral votes from some southern states were not allowed during and after the Civil War. Therefore, there are three pairs of states that have arguments for being the states with the least similar presidential preferences. The states with the lowest percentage of voting similarly, the states with the fewest times voting for the same presidential candidate, and the states with the most times not voting for the same presidential candidate. Vermont and Alabama have only preferred the same candidate in 14% of presidential elections. However, the pair of Vermont and Mississippi is not far different at 14.3% of elections. Vermont, a northern state, is known for its progressive politics and was the first state to ban slavery. In contrast, Alabama, a southern state, was home to the first Confederate capital and has a more conservative history. In fact, Vermont is one of the least religious states, whereas Alabama is among the most religious. This stark contrast in political and social values explains why these states rarely align in presidential elections. Since 1992, Vermont has only voted for Democrats, while Alabama has only voted for Republican presidential candidates. Ronald Reagan is the only candidate that ever won both Vermont and Alabama twice. Due to the Democrats' support of civil rights, many southern states voted for segregationist candidates like George Wallace, Strom Thurmond, and Henry Byrd. Interestingly enough, Vermont was one of the only states that never voted for Franklin D. Roosevelt. His policies didn't resonate with many rural Vermonters who valued limited government. In the decades following the Civil War, southern states tended to vote for Democrats and northern states tended to vote for Republicans. Before the Civil War, Vermont often favored candidates from the Whig Party, due in part to the party's opposition to the expansion of slavery. Now, let's talk about Minnesota and Alaska, the states with the fewest instances of voting for the same presidential candidate. Since Alaska only gained statehood in 1960, it has had less opportunities to vote for the same candidates as other states. Despite the fact that both states are known for their cold climates and love for hockey, Minnesota and Alaska have only agreed on presidential candidates twice. Minnesota's tradition of populism and progressive politics clashes with Alaska's conservative leanings. In 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson won in a landslide over Barry Goldwater. As a result, both Minnesota and Alaska voted for the Democratic candidate that year. In 1972, both states voted for the Republican candidate, Richard Nixon. He also won in a landslide that year. His opponent, George McGovern, only won one state, Massachusetts. In all the other elections since 1960, Minnesota preferred the Democratic candidate, while Alaska preferred the Republican candidate. However, two Democratic nominees, Hubert Humphrey and Walter Mondale, have been from Minnesota, so they might have skewed the results. Vermont and South Carolina have participated in 58 presidential elections and have disagreed on 44 occasions, 30 instances more than Minnesota and Alaska. Therefore, the two states have agreed 24% of the time, 10% more than Vermont and Alabama or Mississippi. However, these states voted in more elections. Since Alabama only became a state in 1819, Vermont and South Carolina have had more opportunities for disagreements. South Carolina, like Alabama, is a deeply conservative southern state, making it another polar opposite to progressive Vermont. Vermont did not vote in the first election, since it was not one of the original 13 colonies. In some of the first presidential elections, states in New England preferred Federalists, while southern states tended to vote for Democratic Republicans. South Carolina did not have electoral votes in 1864 during the Civil War. Between the 1880s and the 1960s, South Carolina almost always voted for the Democratic ticket, while Vermont almost always voted for the Republican ticket. However, since 1992, Vermont has only voted for Democrats, while South Carolina has only voted for Republican presidential candidates. So which pair of states do you think has the strongest argument to be considered the states with the least similar voting preferences? For a full list of the candidates these 5 states voted for, please visit objectivelists.com. Remember to like and subscribe to the Objective Lists channel, as there will be even more interesting videos coming soon.